In his new book, The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy and the Rise of Surveillance Threaten Us and Our Democracy, author Thom Hartmann explains how big data has not only invaded our privacy, but also left us vulnerable to domestic predators and foreign threats, and argues how former President Donald Trump opened the door to Russia.
Host of the Thom Hartmann program and author of The Hidden History of Big Brother in America, How the Death of Privacy, the Rise of Surveillance Threatens Us and Our Democracy, Thom Hartmann joins us now to discuss. Welcome.
Hey, good morning, Kim and Robbie and Ryan. It's great to see you all.
Great to see you as well. So tell us more about the book. Obviously there are a lot of fears about, what kind of information tech companies collect on us, how that makes its way into the government's hands, foreign actors. So, what light can you shed on that process that you've uncovered in your research?
Sure. Well, domestically, the book basically breaks out two kinds of big brothers. There's the big government big brother. And the examples that I open the book with are the stories of the Puritans in New England, basically, whipping women for speaking out against the church, and slavery, in the South, turning into basically a police state. Democracy ended in the South around 1835, 1840, and so we had basically an oligarchy attack a democracy, which we call the Civil War. So that's kind of the historical background. But to today, we now have both government big brothers, through things like the Patriot Act, but also big brother kinds of government all around the world. I mean, this is the fourth time Russia has attacked Ukraine. The first two attacks were cyber attacks in 2015 and 2017. As well as, after they took Ukraine, as well as, big brother here in the United States. So there's a lot of territory to cover.
And Tom, I do want to ask a question about the book, but also, how do you write so fast? You're one of the most prolific authors, and these are good books too. It's not as if you're just tossing these off. What's your approach to book writing? A lot of people, after they finish a book, it's such a painful process. They need a couple years to recover, but pretty quickly you're right back at it.
Back in the 80s, I was writing for Ziff Davis. I was doing a bunch of magazines and popular computing and stuff like that. I was a contributing editor to 7 different magazines. And I was visiting a friend, Michael Curlin, a novelist, an old friend, and he had this 300-page manuscript ready to go to the publisher. And I'm like, Michael, how do you do that? Because I thought he was going to answer like ginseng or something, And he said, I write 5 pages a day, 5 double-spaced pages a day. And he said, if you do that every day, 5 days a week at least, you will produce at least a book a year, and you can technically do 2 books a year. And so I came home and said to my wife, I'm going to write 10 pages a day.
Oh my gosh.
And I wrote over the next 2 years, I wrote the 3 of the world's worst novels, but I learned how to write. And every day, if you just spend, 2, 3, 4 hours every single day writing, I've been producing 2 of these books a year now for 4 years.
I was going to say, I feel like we just had you on talking about your other book fairly recently, so Ryan's got a great point here.
Okay, I'm not losing my mind. I thought that too.
Right.
Okay.
Writers write. If you don't write, you can't call yourself a writer.
So how would you say Donald Trump in particular? So you say that Donald Trump purposefully opened the door for Russia to do what exactly and how?
When the first cyber attack of Ukraine happened, the Obama administration created a new cyber agency inside the White House, or under the aegis of the White House. They were actually in the Eisenhower office building right next door. Appointed a leader to it. As I recall, his last name was Daniels, and hired a senior staff and started acquiring contractors and to build out American cybersecurity specifically against Russian threats. But when Donald Trump came into office, he fired this guy, shut down the office, and within a year, we discovered that the Russians had not only infiltrated the remnants of that office and the remnants of the White House, but were apparently in a half a dozen other agencies. They were in commerce, we know, they were in transportation. I mean, literally sitting inside the servers in the United States. So when Trump had basically shut down our protections, our cyber protections against Russia. when he left office, when Biden came in, this was, the first job that Biden had was rebuilding that agency and trying to get the Russians out of our computers. And we still don't know if they're out of our computers. And the agency is still being rebuilt. But the damage that Donald Trump did to our cybersecurity, I mean, this was right after the Ukraine went in and shut down 10% of, or Russia went into Ukraine, this after the Crimea thing, and shut down 10% of all the computers, took down power stations, blacked out 250,000, 250,000 people in Ukraine, shut down the ability of people to use their credit cards to buy gas, shut down all of the gas pumps in the region, turned off the stores. They literally shut the country down, or at least a large chunk of the country, for a few days as kind of a warning shot across the bow. And that's what animated, in large part, the Obama administration to do something, which Trump reversed.
Why do you think we haven't seen them do that as part of this invasion? Because some Western people were speculating that this would be part of the invasion. They would take down the internet, take down power grids. They haven't, for the most part. Why do you think they haven't?
We all fully expected that they would repeat that. But one of the other things that the Obama administration did when that happened back in 2015 and 2017, or actually in 2015, by 2017 it was Trump. But one of the things that we did is we provided them, and the world actually provided them, with cybersecurity experts. And you had almost 10% of all the computers in Ukraine turned into bricks by this first Russian attack. And so what the Ukrainians did is, as far as we can tell, we're kind of guessing on all this. This is not the kind of stuff that governments make public, but put together a fairly robust cybersecurity system to prevent that from happening again.
And Ukraine does have a lot of kind of IT power, right? I just say that because I know that companies all across the United States are constantly outsourcing tech work to Ukraine.
Yes. Yeah, and the Obama administration encouraged their building that kind of infrastructure, and Ukraine, and also the other Baltic states. We're talking on Skype. Skype was developed by two guys in Estonia. Another one of the countries, just above Latvia and Lithuania, that and below Finland, that Russia is looking at, with with an evil eye, as it were, or whatever. And so, absolutely.
So your argument isn't so much about the election, interference, because that's and then that's something that gets discussed a lot. When you talk about the threat of Russia, a lot of Democrats, a lot of mainstream media are talking about the disinformation campaign, the Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Does your book address that subject?
Yeah, I've got a couple chapters on the Trump campaign, the 2015-2016 campaign, and how Russia helped them, but mostly, it was Cambridge Analytica, having hacked data out of Facebook that Facebook just kind of left there for the world to grab, combined with Facebook's algorithm that pushes sticky and outrageous content, which Cambridge Analytica was perfectly willing to exploit. There were days leading up to the election when over 100,000 different variations of a single ad were sent out in one day. People were so granularly targeted, and we really don't even have the information on all this. Facebook has it, but they're not sharing it with the world, and as far as we can tell, most of these ads have never even been seen by anybody. But the data that they have on you, what your favorite drink is, whether you've ever ridden a motorcycle, what brand of cigarette you smoke, if you smoke, how your relationships are going, whether you're dating. Just all this kind of super granular micro data. They're literally developing ads to target people based on those individual preferences.
Yeah, but my understanding is that Cambridge Analytica basically massively overhyped what they were actually able to do with that information, and that there is not at all this direct correlate. Like, yes, maybe Facebook knows this, and thus we found this out. What kind of cola you like, but turning that into an ability to, in a sort of like mind control sense way, send an advertisement to a swing voter, and then they're going to vote for Trump when they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton, or not vote when they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's that step two in that three-step process basically doesn't exist as far as I can tell.
That was largely step one, which was, hey, let's push these ads out. Step two then became the algorithm, Facebook's own algorithm, that amplified that message wildly and got it into communities that otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten it. And then step three was the involvement of what appear to be Russian trolls. There might have been trolls from other countries as well, at scale, which the Mueller report talks about at some length. Amplifying that message and particularly promoting the message. I mean, the main message that the Russian trolls were promoting in 2016 was not so much vote for Donald Trump as there's no difference between the two parties, or Hillary Clinton hates black people because she talked about super predators. There were messages targeted at weak Democratic voters and messages targeted at the black community very aggressively, and those were hyper amplified. Those weren't necessarily coming out of Cambridge Analytica, but they were hyper amplified by Russian trolls.
And
Tom,
I was just going to say that to me, those have always been kind of overblown because they're up against billions of dollars in other messaging, and so while
it's spent by the campaigns themselves,
spent by the campaigns and the media, which gets to the more interesting role that it appears that Russia played when they hacked John Podestas' email, and then the entire campaign from that point on was this drip of new emails coming out, which, so you got Hillary Clinton's Goldman Sachs speeches, which it's her fault for giving the speech to Goldman Sachs in the first place, and secondly, her fault for not being transparent about it. But that role of hacking and then getting out that information, which then drives tens of millions of dollars worth of coverage, to me swamped the stuff that they were doing on Facebook. I'm curious if you looked closer into that, and if you think there's any doubt, because there's still some folks out there that say, well, we don't know that was Russia that hacked Podesta's email. What's your read on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right, Ryan. And so what we're looking at are incremental slices that when you add them all up, get you the electoral votes to become president, even though you lost the election by 3 million votes. So had there not been, for example, that hack that Trump had asked the Russians to do, and had those stories not been released, and had the Hillary's emails not, then probably Hillary would have won. Or alternatively, you can say, had the Cambridge Analytica stuff not happened, then probably Hillary would have won. Or had, I see each one of these things as incremental steps, but specifically you were asking about the role of government, in the context of this book, in the role of governments getting into computers. And that's what I was speaking to by and large. But I agree.
I just have one last question for you, Tom. Seems to be two competing ideas just in the title of your book. So I'm wondering if you can help us figure out, kind of reconcile this. So you first say that the rise of, the death of privacy and the rise of surveillance has threatened us and our democracy. And then there's also this, big data has left us vulnerable to domestic predators and foreign threats. And what we're seeing now, especially since 2016, is that there seems to be, these are two competing ideas. So we see that people are wanting to have more, they want to crack down harder on these potential foreign threats, but we're having to sacrifice, actually, our privacy in order to have those things. So we're seeing more censorship, or we're seeing more surveillance, big brother on us. So how do we have both? How do we maintain and protect our privacy and our individual rights as a free people while also cracking down on these potential threats?
Kim, you nailed the question that that the United States government has been struggling with since the George Washington administration, which is, how intrusive can government get before it starts becoming the problem that it's trying to prevent. And, we had the firewall between the FBI and CIA for a while, and, one could do domestic and the other couldn't, and all that kind of stuff. We've gone through dozens and dozens over the years of iterations of these kind of things. The most recent big one, of course, was the Patriot Act after 9/11, which cobbled together a whole bunch of pieces of legislation that by and large right-wingers had wanted for years and years. But this is the great challenge. I mean, you've identified it. And the problem that I'm seeing, and that I write about in the book at some length, is the massive granularity of data about every single one of us that is held by a large number of big data companies and bought and sold on a data marketplace. It has the ability to compromise at the individual level in ways that are pretty shocking. Now, mostly this data is being used, this is the domestic stuff, mostly this data is being used right now by these companies to determine whether you can return goods in a store, or how long you have to wait on hold when you call a company. Are you a potentially good customer or not, based on your habits, on your net worth, on things like that. But it's truly astonishing what they have. I mean, some of these companies that are involved in that are selling rating services, for example, to landlords or to employers, are bragging that they've got 15,000 or 20,000 individual data points on every single person in their database.
Yeah. Wow. Thom Hartmann, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Kim and Ryan.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.